And every day and every way we take a piece of the earth and we make it stronger. And welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. I am your griot, your sensei, here to tell you a story. And don't believe a word I say. And this show is simply for entertainment's sake. And if you are a, the child that has an innocent heart, understands. A child, a matter that is controlled by fear and self loathing, of egos, illusion of power. That is what we have to stop. That is what we have to step up to and say, no, no more. But we do not have to do it with anger in our heart. Only thing that works is love's co-creation. We must find a way in every day and every way in all of our lives to be all of our relations, to be the we and me. Your life, my life, is not about me. It's about the we. You need to find something in your life that brings you joy and not just a paycheck. We were not put on this world to be mercenary, mercantile, store owners of war's fate, of death and destruction. We were not put here to be the mercenary, mercantile of extraction, taking from love's abundance that is for all of us, and not just that 1/10 of 1%. This last year, 9 men, white men, have made more money in the United States than the rest of the other 98% of the citizens. And 40% of the children in America are going to bed hungry, going to bed without learning anything, going to bed in fear, going to bed without understanding what nurturing is. All of those who are so ideologically set against abortion. I'm not for abortion, but I'm not for telling a woman what to do with her body. And if we were to just teach children about the biology, when I was in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I was in a new school system, and they had art, and they had music and theater and literature, and they had math and science, but they taught it through music, art, and literature. And in 6th grade, we had biology, the kind of biology you have in high school. And we learned how reproduction was done and what sex was. And we were taught that sex was a biological imperative for human species to, create offspring. But the eros, the twisting of the twin flame of love's co-creation was something different than sex. And we were shown that simple dynamics of biology could keep one from having pregnancy, unless that pregnancy was truly wanted. And now hormones drive the sexual drive, and it's there so we reproduce. And the best time to reproduce is between 15 and 21. And so women's sexual organs are internal, inside their body. Men's are external, outside their body, which gives a good metaphorical reason why women are more empathetic and men aren't. But men's sperm modality is what creates pregnancy, right? The insemination of the egg. And men, like all other humans, they're all individual biologically. They, everything in the human spectrum is a spectrum, from here to here, and everybody's in between. So some men's swimmers, sperm cells, like it warm, right? They don't like it cold. So if you want to slow down the sperm modality, what you do is you let the boys hang in the breeze. You have you wear boxers. Now, if your boys like it cold, you wear tighty whities. You keep the boys close to the 98.6, and that will increase the inevitability of the male not being able to fertilize the female's eggs, right? Like by 80%, right? And again, it's in the spectrum. Some people, it's more like 30 or 40%. Other people, it's like 90%. But so you put that spectrum together, it's about 60 to 80%. Then you teach the boy to understand the ovulation cycle of the woman, along with the woman. And that's just a simple, calendar. And if you mark off the days, which you can not get pregnant, and then you can have sex, right? Without intent. And those days when you're ovulating, and so that mathematical equation is good for about 80%, meaning that 20% is in between, right? And third is when women are ovulating, they give off a discharge. So if the woman and the male understand this and know what it looks like, so if you take all three of those, guys wearing the proper underpants, women understanding their ovulation cycle, and that they have a discharge when they are in a place of being pregnated, you could have, and this is all, Christianity, Orthodox Judaism, and Islam, Buddhism all go along with that. And the rhythm, it's called rhythm, right? So you could, right now we have 1 million plus abortions. We have close to 2 million unwanted pregnancies, right? So, you're sterile, so you're good. Well, that's nice for you, but I'm talking about the general issue, right? And that these general issues are used to manipulate the meat puppets, which are about 98% of the population in pretty much the world. And if you look simply at the numbers, presently, we are led to believe that the world is worse off today than it ever was. Not really. The 70s were a really bad time. I mean, we went through an economic collapse. I mean, New York City, the cities of the United States went bankrupt. And the majority of the European cities were still reeling from World War II. They were still, when I first went to London in the 70s, there were still buildings burned out in London from the Blitz, So we have to do things in a different way. We can't just continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different outcome. And everything, our political structure in the United States anyway, and pretty much around the world, is a soap opera. There is no such thing as anything that is organically spontaneous. The news is not organically spontaneous. Politics are not organically spontaneous. We are all being led. And as Noam Chomsky said, they're manufacturing consent. And Miss Christine, KB, that statement, I'm sterile, so I'm good. And as I said in the beginning of this monologue, that our life is not just about us. It's about the we and me. It's about all our relations. And our societies understand this. We will have the same chaos over and over again. We'll have the same collapse of enterprise. And when the Roman Empire fell, when Babylon fell, when Egypt fell, when Mesopotamia fell, when Greece fell, when Spain fell, when England fell, these are all motifs of the same failure of a culture based on extraction and not love. Right? There is no such thing as profit. Keynesian economics is like a joke. Again, it's just a soap opera. And until we right now, and to go up in arms over Me Too or Black Lives Matter or we will, the KKK. I mean, they're all the same. Until the KKK can join arms with Black Lives Matter, which join arms with women, we're not going to have peace. Peace comes with love. Peace comes with understanding, and peace comes with forgiveness. And so it's up to you, kind viewer, to imagine a better world for yourself. KB, why do you think that's not going to happen? It's it's been done before, and what's truly understandable is that it will occur. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not the day after tomorrow, maybe not 100 years from now or 1,000 years from now, but it will occur. Now, it could happen like that if we were to suspend our disbelief that it couldn't happen. If we were to, in every day, in every way, whatever you do it with a peaceful heart. You do it with unconditional forgiveness, with patience and humility. Because people are terrible. In actuality, people are good. I was in San Francisco when the Northridge earthquake occurred. And their big prison next to the city hall, next to the courthouse, it basically cracked in half and half of it fell away, which allowed, about 400 people who were in jail to escape. And they were all wearing orange jumpsuits. And to a person, so they, the building falls down. They're all like thrown out on the street. They're all running away. The police are dealing with other things rather than these guys. And they're running through the burning streets and the buildings falling down and people screaming from inside the buildings. And to a person, they stopped and went into those buildings and got people out. And for like 16 hours, they worked shoulder to shoulder with, first responders and policemen, and in their orange jumpsuits. And once everything calmed down and they got everyone out that they could get out, the policeman looked at the guys with the orange suits and so they walked them back, to a place where they could secure them. Well, the judge, the biggest, most powerful judge in San Francisco at the time, basically said, listen, this is like pretty amazing. So I'm going to summarily let, find all the people who haven't killed someone, but who are there, like 90% of the people who were in orange jumpsuits were there for drug-related offenses or, lower level felonies and higher level misdemeanors, not really capital crime. So anybody who wasn't there on a capital crime, they let them go. And then put together a system to support them so they wouldn't recidivize, wouldn't go back to jail. Help them get educated, help them get a job, help them find a house, not put them on parole. So if they make one little mistake, they go back to jail. And I saw that happen. And it happened in a short period of time. So that's miracles happen. There's a book called The Course in Miracles. I suggest you to, KB, go look at that. And miracles happen all the time in my life because I have opened my heart and my consciousness to serve love's co-creation. And that's why I can live like a millionaire on $400 a month, right? And that's why I'm alive, even though I'm really sick, 15 years of working in the corporate world and gaining 260 pounds and being 400 pounds plus, it shot my liver, my kidney, my spleen, you name it, gave me, everything my parents had, I got in spades. And I didn't die. And I lost 200, I am down to 210, and I'm still losing a pound here and there. And, by next summer, I'll be at my high school weight of about 180. And, I have super high blood pressure and cholesterol, yet my blood pressure is, normally at 113 over 50 or 60, right? Or less, but I know it's around 115. And that's, I'm not taking, I don't have the statins to take, but my diet and other supplements that I'm taking and herbs that are in the forest is keeping my blood pressure. But I still have the issues of hypertension and cholesterol, but, it's not affecting me like it's going, could. And diabetes, neuropathy, charcoal legs, I have a ton of things wrong with me, but I can walk. I used to have to walk with a walker and my legs in braces. Don't do that anymore. So these are all all of my doctors take care of me because they're kind of amazed. Yeah, my endocrinologist keeps saying the same stupid joke over and over that I'm the healthiest dead guy he knows. So KB, people are not terrible. If you are, and I've been in many, many, many parts of the world that were super violent, war zones, right? And in the United States, New York City in the 70s and 80s was like, Beirut, hundreds of people died a month in New York City. When New York City was broke in the 70s, they let go half the police department, and so I was, socially active. I created with a number of people, Homestead. We took over 50 buildings and housed 500 homeless families, people who had jobs and had been working, and then the rug was pulled out from underneath them, right? With the good old Reagan economics. And the person who made it even worse was, probably the worst president for social dynamics was Bill Clinton. And he put more people in jail. He got rid of the safety net. He got rid of Glass-Steagall. He de-controlled everything, utilities, the stock market, you name it. And that is what put us into the position we are today. And this is, anyone who thinks that there is, a political process, no. I subscribe to the George Carlin School of Economics and Political Science, and basically he said that there's a small group of people who own and run everything, and it's a club, and we're not in it. And simply put, that's what's going on. And they are desperate to do this, build back better. And the build back better they're doing is fascism, right? Ginger tea, yum yum. So if people weren't basically good, we wouldn't be here. The majority of people are good. Now they're stressed out. Yes, they're stressed out. But in many, 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 many situations in the last 2 years, I've come across people who were about to pull out a gun and start shooting people. But I went to them and was nice to them, talked to them, read their palms, talked about who and what they were. And they didn't end up. I was back in February of 2020. I was in a Dollar Tree, a big Dollar Tree. And people, they had 6 cash register, 1 cashier. And there were about 70 people waiting online, right? And I went in there just to get a few things, and I looked around and I saw that, I'm not going to stick around here, breathing the air of all these air breathers, because nobody had a mask. But there were about 10 people who had sidearms right there, right? And there was 2 guys carrying the AKs with them, right? In, the Dollar Tree. And this fat lady, I don't want to be pejorative about fat ladies, but she was, you're basically obese, poor person who lives on Mountain Dew and cheese doodles. And so she's standing on line, and she's and she's got a little basket with 5 or 6 things. And she's just going, she puts the basket there, the person is run, and about 20 people who came with her jump behind her. And everyone's, and I said, I looked at this, and they were about to start, everyone was armed, and everyone was about to start shooting each other. And I used my outside voice and said, yo, what is fucking going on with you morons? I said, why do all of you people think you need a gun? And lady, you see all these people who've just been waiting online for the last half an hour? What do you think gives you the right to disrespect them to this point of you not being there? Well, these people are my family and I can let them in. I said, no, you can't. Because if you do that, if I didn't just speak in a loud voice, and I said, how many of you people are Christian? And they all raised their hand. And I said, well, do you think Jesus would go along with what's going on here right now? And why, did you fill your whole cart up with toilet paper? You really need all of the toilet paper that was there? Don't you think a lot of these other people should have at least 1 roll? And I went on and on and on and on and on and told stories and on and on and on and on. And the fat lady said, so are you a preacher? What gives you the right to you? Only if you were a preacher could you. I said, for this moment, I am a preacher. At this moment, I am representing Jesus Christ and everybody else who's coming from the side of love, understanding, forgiveness, empathy, humility, and patience. And then I turned to the manager and I said, you got to have more than just 1 cashier. Well, they're stuck in it. No, forget it. Look how many people here. Get everyone who can run a cash, fill all 6 of these lanes up and get these people out of here. And that's what they did. Now, KB, if those people were terrible, they would have started shooting each other. They were armed to the teeth. Like I said, there were 2 guys with their AKs with them, and everyone else who had it on the side, on their holster, had, automatic Glocks and 9 millimeters, and if they were really terrible people, that would have been a lot of dead folk. And so anyway, it took me all of 20 minutes to do that, and I walked out without buying anything. And the manager lady picked up my little basket, and I had a few things. She goes, "Just take this with you, the basket too." Yeah, baby. Oh, okay. Okay, I thought I put it out of the way. Okay, I'll pull it up a little bit. Not a problem. Are you leaving early tomorrow? Yeah, I'll get it for the morning. So is that little heater doing good for you? Yeah. So I blew out the leaves. I cleaned all the dishes so they're not greasy and the surfaces. And vacuumed the floors. Yeah, and played with Smokey. Oh, he's really okay. He spent a good deal when I was cleaning and vacuuming. He did just that and watched me do it. But he didn't run around. He didn't chew up anything. He didn't get upset. We had a good time. So yeah, in the morning I will move this. Okay. Right. So I'll move the car a little. I'll keep it back where I had it. Okay. Ah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, so we really are at a great opportunity, because like I said, the power. We have in 1947 we started to pull out of the Piscean Age, and that's why the hidden hand, the powers that be, the Hail Hydra folk doubled down, tripled down. Wars everywhere, never-ending wars. Majority of the capital and resources put towards weapons rather than the social good. But we spend over $6 trillion a year on the military-industrial complex, right? And it's not just a military-industrial complex; it's a banking, education, media, military-industrial complex. Go read Noam Chomsky's Manufactured Consent, and go read Bernays' books on social structure, social manipulation, and propaganda. And he was that whole crew was straight out of good old Freud, and so it's easy to manipulate the human mud puppet. But it's not very easy to manipulate someone who lives their life by love's co-creation, to serve and with compassion, humility, and grace of patience. How many of you out there are patient folk? And KB, what floats your boat? What do you think is important? What makes you happy? And what is, what do you see yourself as? What are you? Tell me what you are. So, how about some thumbs up, guys? How about some more subscribers? Well, and really think, KB, What do you do? What are you? You a mercenary killer? Are you a banker? Are you a religious zealot? Or are you someone who tries to nurture the human spirit? Are you a teacher? You know, if you are a teacher, do you crush that poor child's spirit, or do you try to? I had a great kindergarten teacher. Her name was Mrs. Gerling, and she used to just read us the greatest, Charlotte's Web, and she read us everything, and really got us into reading. Now, my grandma got me into reading, and I had other mentors when I grew up in Harlem, and you know, right kind of up where we lived, there were all of these. There was Carnegie Mellon, there was Manhattanville, there was a number of colleges up there, and also religious institutions that were quite outstanding. And they taught us all, not just the kids who were going to the universities. They taught in the public schools that were there. I'm a trans woman that works retail. Okay. So, were you born a woman and now you're a guy, or were you born a guy and now a woman? So, I basically, in the 60s and 70s, was involved in the theater, and there were a great deal of gay and LGBTQ. They were there, and there was no, logo. It was just, that's what these people were. And they had, so I built nightclubs, and there were a number of really amazing gay clubs that I worked on the West Village and uptown. Born a male, now a female, right? And, as I was saying before, humanity lives within a spectrum, right? So to expect every male to be, football playing guy, and every female, Donna Reed, no, there's this big spectrum here, and that's where we all are on. And we're like Mr. Potato Head. There's like 8 eyes, 8 noses, 8 ears, 8 mouths, and then 40 something different permutations. And that's how I can read people really well, because there are a limited number of categories, and then everyone's different. That fits into those, 52 or so categories, and everyone has their own spirit. Now, if you live by spirit, then you are doing a good job. If you think you're just your body, no, you're more than a mud puppet. You're more than a bag of water, right? And your soul is just that server that connects the higher consciousness. All this is little golden thread that goes all the way through us, through all our chakras. And we have crown chakra and about 6 other chakras. It's called 6 and above. We only use our 5 senses, and our 5 senses can only understand 0.00049% of the universe. That's all we see. Well, that's all we understand. There was microwave, there was infrared, there was radio waves, there were all these things that were out there. We never knew they were there until we made instruments that could say, oh, look at that, right? So, but we have this other sensory essence that's above our crown chakra, and it's the 6 and above. And through meditation, we can tap that, right? And when you tap that, you feel the unconditional love of love's co-creation. When you feel that, it is like the best feeling you ever had. I don't know if you ever saw Bill Murray in the movie Scrooge, right? And he has a soliloquy at the end, and one of the things he's talking about Christmas, it's a feeling. And if you feel that feeling, it's the greatest thing, and you want it every day, and not just on Christmas, and not just buying It's a feeling of love's and he goes on, and it makes me cry every time. That's my favorite thing that he ever did, you know. And so we are who we are, and we are a work in progress, you know. And all of our relations, all of us in the Great Link, we represent the reflection. So when Moses was up on the top of the mountain with the goats, and the burning bush showed up, right? And the burning bush told Moses to go back to Egypt and free the Egypt, the Hebrew nation from the Egyptians, right? And that's not really what he said. He said that, Moses, you have to go back and free, release the Hebrew nation from their own oppression. And that's really, I mean, the only person who can oppress you is yourself, right? And so I knew loads of people who were gay and transgendered before even people were talking about it, right? Because that has been going on forever. Like I said, humanity lives within this spectrum here, so it's been forever. And if you read the Greek tragedies, you see, if you see Spartacus, you see this story of what's, it was no big deal back in the Greek days, guys like, when the soldiers, centurions would go out and fight for Rome, they were given a little boy as their servant and took care of the centurion's needs. And, they still had girlfriends and wives back home. And if you read the Greek literature on Eros, you see that there's this concept Plato had called polyamorous. And that's where you love everybody. And Plato has a great treatise on this because he's explaining how sex is different from love, right? And eros is different from sex and love. Now, eros has more to do with love than sex because sex is just a biological fact of reproduction, right? So we are made to be confused by all of this. We're never taught about it. I was very lucky to be in a school system that was just changing and went from a very rural thing to a more upscale, modern way of doing stuff. And that was in the 60s and 70s. And so we were way ahead of the time, right? And it was like an experiment to see how well this would do, what it would how the kids would turn out. And it responded very well, just like in New York City in the 30s when, with the New Deal, the education system was totally revamped from slave education to individual freedom, So they had art and they had music and they had schools for art and science and, every discipline you could think of, right? And they taught all of the other subjects through art and science or this or that. And STEM is the most perverted idea of what New York tried to do back in the 30s. And you have to realize whenever the federal government or the state says things like no child left behind, what they're really saying is every child is going to be left behind. They are going to destroy the education system to the point where people would just be literate enough, back to the slave education of the latter part of the 19th century. And because up until then, there was no public education. Every municipality and every family and every neighborhood and every cohort would educate their children. Like that's how I was educated, I lived in Harlem and there were all these really classically educated people who would teach the kids. There were all these guys who would hang out at the parks and play chess, right? And they would play chess for cash, like between 2 and 6. They would play people who would put money down and they would play, right? And they'd have the clock and they do that. But in the early part of the day and later after 6, If kids wanted to learn how to play chess, those guys and gals would teach the kids how to play chess. And in doing so, they would teach them about the world, tell them stories. They would be griots, but they'd be using chess as a vehicle. Right? And I lived in many small towns around the world that had gone and done that. And now the hidden hand, all that's going on in Africa and the third world, they are taking apart this generation of people who, the most interesting place on the planet right now that has the greatest potential for change is Africa. But they're, the powers that shouldn't be, the hidden hand and the high table are all doing everything they can to jeopardize the well-being of 3.6 billion people. Right? And a guy like Modi in India, that's the largest democracy in the world. Well, yeah, it was trying to do that, but not anymore. Modi turned India into a fascist state. They have no cash; everything's electronic, and he's doing everything he can to knock off the largest. He really wants to, get rid of half of his population in the next 10, 15 years. China, the same thing, right? And the rest of the world will be put on that plate. And in the United States, what's going to happen? We are just going to go further and further into the NICP, Neo Insane Clown Party. There was a band called the Insane Clown Party. And if you go listen to their music and just put Neo in front of it, and you would see George W., right? And George H., and Ronnie, and the rest of the neocons. And the neocons aren't just Republicans; they are Hillary Clinton is a neocon. Bernie Sanders, neocon. The all of the people who call themselves progressives are neocons. So, don't believe a word I say. Go check it out. And so what's going to happen is, Jojo, the used car salesman, who's been in the Senate for 50 years and then had 8 years at Biden. I mean, this guy should be able to be the politician's politician. But he's not. He's like totally, they are not going to get anything passed. And the only thing they passed so far was the, COVID-19, bill to give everyone their $600 check. But the richest 1% got $5 trillion from that, whereas the rest of us, not so much. And he won't be doing any kind of building bridges or fixing potholes or, fixing the safety net. Sorry, And so what's going to happen is when election day comes, in less than a year, because here it is November, and so it's already clicking down, right? And the Republicans will overwhelmingly win the House and the Senate, right? Nancy Pelosi gone. And what you will see is that in the House, the overwhelming Republican representatives of the House will vote in as the Speaker of the House Donald Trump. Right? And the person who will win the presidency in 2024 will either be Rick Moron Boy from Florida or Moscow Mitch, but he should really be called Beijing Mitch, right? And or Sleazy Worm Mitch, And there are about 4 or 5 other usual suspects that will be president, who will be Republican, and they will be basically 100% fascist. And we will see the United States slip into National Socialism. And we will see people put in camps and other things of that nature. And it will be basically a carbon copy of Germany 1933. Because in 1933, Adolf Hitler was legally voted in as chancellor. And at that time, Germany was the most democratic country in Europe. I too follow the teachings of Carlin. Well, I don't vote, there's no sense in it. Because it's all rigged, like Donald Trump said, it's a rigged game. But it has been a rigged game since 1776, Constitution was written for white, rich, land gentried, slave-owning men, right? It took women. The most interesting thing, KB, you should go read up on the women's movement of suffrage, because in 1840 is when they had their first meeting up there in the Finger Lakes region of New York State and laid out their strategy. And they said, it's going to take, we can't take guns to the street and take, that's not going to happen. They said, we're going to strategically move and change things, and it'll take 100 years. They were right, 1840, and they got the vote in 1913. Right? And what's really interesting was that Gandhi, basically, he was a straight up, imperial lawyer / Englishman, right? He went to school in England. He was highly educated. He was of the higher classes, the higher castes. He thought of himself as a white Englishman. And because he was a really good lawyer, this corporation, without realizing what he was, sent him to Africa, South Africa, to represent them. And he was on first class on a train and, had the suit on and had a suite. And the guy punching tickets came in and saw this guy, colored guy in that room, stopped the train and threw him off the train, and kept all his clothes and everything. Like basically, left them in the in the middle of Africa in his underpants, and so Gandhi came back and was pissed, and he's a great lawyer, so he just started suing the shit out of everybody and going nuts on the storyline, and they kept throwing him in jail, and he just kept strategic that African prejudice of the South Africans just enough. And he went back to India and said, "Okay, I'm gonna get the English out of here, and I'm going to make India for Indians." And he was quite nationalistic, and he wasn't thinking about women's freedom, right? And it took him about 60 years to realize how misogynist he was. Even though he was like Mr. Non-violence and did all the stuff that he did, he still was a misogynist, right? But by the time he, ended World War II, he had been patient enough and humble enough to realize his issues, and he changed them. And that's when he got shot. Just when he was like, "Hey, I have freed myself," right? And that's when he got shot by the hidden hand, right? Not by some crazed young person, because none of those kind of assassinations are done by the lone gunman. None. Period. None. And some of them are so flagrant about it. Like a good example is Robert Kennedy's assassination in that kitchen, right? And the odds of him getting shot there were really, by Sirhan were like unbelievable. Sirhan had a 22 gauge gun, right? The bullet that killed Robert Kennedy was a 38, a policeman special. And so the 22 caliber bullets holes were in like the ceiling and the wall, and all the bullets were counted forensically, not in Robert Kennedy. They were in a round, right? But the media said that Sirhan did it, right? And Sirhan had been, mentally stepped on. His handlers were there, the girl in the polka dotted dress. Anyway, if you were to study Robert Kennedy's assassination, you would see how um, just flagrant it was. And Marilyn Monroe's assassination and Dorothy Kilgallen's assassination and about 300 other people's assassination. But nobody wants to study that. And the people who do are called conspiracy theorists. And I don't believe in conspiracy, but if you were to take conspiracy theorists, just look into Webster's dictionary, conspiracy theorist, right? Conspiracy is when more than two people come together in secret to do something, right? So that happens all the time. People who are married and have illicit affairs, that's a conspiracy. It's not like that doesn't happen. And that little um, just a brief, ooh, look at that, of the Pandora Papers, right? And it showed how many of our political leadership are rich, are, famous, all the people who we thought we could trust, had socked away trillions of dollars, right? And anyone talking about that now? No. Is anyone going to jail about that? No, right? And, and it keeps coming out every now and then, these kind of, the papers about Afghanistan. I mean, it was a lost war by 202. It was just that people were making so much money and, changing the global political structure to a place where, right? So, KB, I don't believe in anything. I have faith in love's co-creation. And my whole life, I've done things that created stuff. So I would suggest anyone who's watching this show, and I'm speaking especially to you, KB, because you are the only one who's responding on the chat, is that all of you, all my life, I've done things that manifested things. And nightclubs and restaurants and housing a place for homeless people and other political, social, environmental things. The anti-nuclear movement, the anti-nuclear power movement, the anti-nuclear weapons movement. I mean, if we wanted to have electric power, instead of using uranium, we could use thorium. Uranium is it's a limited resource, it's expensive, but it makes nuclear weapons. It makes fissile materials. Thorium, unlimited, comes from the ocean and makes no fissile materials. There is no radioactive waste. We have more than around 200 ancient nuclear power plants all around America, all built on top of fault lines, in low-lying areas. If they can get flooded, you can have Fukushima. And the Fukushima reactors were small compared to the monsters we have built in America. Because large utilities, if they're going to spend some money, they want to have this big thing that can make a lot of juice really cheap, right? Because the Price-Anderson Act, basically, they can stick the ratepayer with the price tag of the power plant, no matter how expensive and how terribly conceived it is. And we haven't really built put online a reactor since the late 70s because it just doesn't work, right? And a number of utilities have gone bankrupt. Lilco is a good example, right? They were so incompetent in building their one reactor that it made them, it was just, and politically, Mario Cuomo had no other, even though he was owned by J.P. Morgan, he had to tell Lilco, okay, we're going to buy you out and we're going to turn your utility back to a public utility. And everyone's, it's going to kill the economy of Long Island. It didn't, because it became richer and richer because all the rich people moved there. But the issues aren't technological. I went to a school called Cooper Union, and I was in a department there, which was quite interesting, called Alternative Technologies. And back in the 60s, we developed all the stuff that they're touting now as alternative. Wind powers, and the windmills that we made weren't the pinwheel type, they were the barrel type. And the torque is way more. So you have this barrel and all the vanes all around it. And so when it's really windy, the vanes get pulled in and the wind just goes around the barrel. Pinwheel, if the wind is stronger than X, it gets torn up. There's no way that that pinwheel can be turned into a safe thing. Even if though they turn the wings of the pinwheel into the wind, it's still, if it's going more than 80 miles an hour, it's going to rip that thing up. And so that's, a problem. And the other thing about solar power, right, photovoltaics, if you were to put in what they're doing now, and we did it in 1968, we put diodes, or not quite the diodes we have today, but something similar to that as the light source, and we would put we made street lights like the outdoor lights that you buy at Walmart's, right? And if we had done that, we could have saved about 15% of all the power used in America. And there were other efficiencies that could have been done, like balancing the load of distribution. And they used to do that, but then they didn't care, right? Because they wanted to burn more fuel so they could charge more money for the power once it got decontrolled. And so there are plenty of technological, and Nikola Tesla he discovered 0-point energy in his experiments at Colorado Springs, and he came back to Long Island and he built Wardenclyffe, and they built the Shoreham nuclear plant right on top of the footprint of Wardenclyffe, just to slap Tesla in the face. And he developed a free electric source that could be transmitted without wires anywhere on the world. And that's what we're going to have. In the next 10 years, they're going to put induction coils, the Build Back Better, reconstruction of our highways. They are going to, like 81 and 95, good example. They have enough land where they can add 2 more lanes on those highways. And those 2 lanes will have induction coils in them. And they will have all the trucks. Right now, Volvo, in their Dublin factory in Virginia, they don't make diesel tractor trailers anymore. They're all electric, and they don't have batteries. They're all induction motors. And so within 3 years, we will have trucks, and we're having, there's so much trouble in our chain of delivering things. It's we can't get enough trucks. Well, in 3 years, it's just all the trucks are going to be robots, and they're not going to be diesel, and they're going to be riding on wireless electricity. And after 2026, no one will own a car. It'll be against the law to own a car. It'll be against the law to own anything, and you will be given, a set income, and you will be given a place to live, and you will be given a smartphone that everything will be done on. And it'll be like India and China, meaning your smartphone, there will be no cash. So then there will be no underground economy. And, you go to the supermarket, you walk in, every product will have an RFID, and your face will be your credit card. You walk in, you'll be, yep, that's you. And you go in and you'll pick up the few things you need and you'll walk out. You won't go to there won't be no cash registers. Right? And everything will be that. Your face will be your credit card. And now, if you're not the citizen that the state wants, well, you will, instead of being able to get on an airplane and go someplace, not going to be able to do that. You'll have to take a train or a bus. And you won't have a car. You'll have an app. Hit this little thing. And there will be no cars running on tires on roads. they will basically be the, everyone, I wanted my George Jetson car. Well, that's what you'll have. You'll hit the app and boop, 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 and that box will show up and you will be transported to wherever you want to go. But if you want the citizen that they like, you like speak out of place, if you do things that are socially outside the norm that the NICP, Neo Insane Clown Party, and that's what we already have. That that's the politics we have today. Is the NICP, Neo Insane Clown Party? I mean, if George W. and Dick Cheney weren't the Insane Clown Party, if Bill Clinton wasn't the Insane Clown Party, if Obama wasn't the Insane Clown Party, I mean that guy. I remember ABC used to have this show every 100 day, the first 100 days of every president. The ABC Nightline guys would follow him around. What did he do today? He wakes up, he goes to the gym, he plays some basketball, has breakfast, he goes to the office by whatever, and does the business of being president. Well, they followed him around, and so he wakes up and he brushes his teeth and he goes and plays basketball and he sneaks a cigarette and he's don't tell my wife, and then he goes and have a really nice breakfast and then he goes to the office and they do the rundown, the security rundown, the people he's going to go talk to, the meetings he's going to have, and he you see him and he's like little Lord Fauntleroy. He doesn't have a clue what's going on. And there's this one scene where he's sitting with his cabinet, right? And he's at the head of the table, and they're all around him, and they're talking about this, and the news guys are there, and they say to the news guys, "Okay, everybody's got to get out. We got to get to work." And so the news guys, everyone, the ABC guys don't stay in the room, but they stay in the White House. The other guys go back to where the news people hang out in the White House. Anyway, so they're like outside in the hallway, and I got the camera like focused on the door. And about 20 minutes later, Barack comes out, and he sits out in the hallway, and while the cabinet is having the meeting without him there. Joe Biden's in there, but Barack ain't. And anyway, so they're the 100-day ABC Nightline guys get rushed out of the hallway, and they go down and they come back about an hour and a half later, and Barack is still sitting out in the hallway. And so they say, "Well, Mr. President, what have you're the president. What have you decided today within the construct of business as the executive part of the government?" He goes, "Well, today I got to decide whether to have cheeseburgers or regular burgers." And that's when I said, "Okay, the jig is up." Oh, let's see. Would love to see the rest, but got to be up early. Okay, KB. Love you, buddy. And you stay well. Keep the faith. And what you need to do is be the decider and have more fun. And everything you do in every day and every way, you take the peace of the earth and make it better. And you live with patience, empathy, forgiveness, and humility. And you're going to have a good life. And Vlad, right? Vlad. Thomas Edison of the 21st century, maybe Elon Musk. Yep, exactly. Because he, Edison was a moron, and he was just a poster boy of J.P. Morgan's, and Tesla was the brilliant one. And I saw an interview with Elon Musk when he was setting up his first rockets, right? And someone was, so he was like giving an interview. There were about 10 reporters, and this one guy goes, "So, which did you like? Who did you think was a better person, a better inventor, Edison or Tesla?" And he goes, "Who's Tesla?" And another guy's, "But Mr. Musk, Elon, you have a company named Tesla." And he goes, "Well, I was just told to name it that." And the reason he named it that, or someone told him to name that, is that the Tesla car, why the Tesla car really is a good car, is that it has induction motors, not DC battery powered motors. Meaning, the Tesla has a battery, but it has a rectifier that turns the DC into AC, and that's what runs the induction motor, because the induction motor will go to 0 to 1,000,000 miles an hour like that. And it really once it gets moving, it doesn't use any power. Whereas a DC motor uses up the juice. So um, he had no idea. And someone kind of explained it to him. He said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." He goes, "Well, why I like Edison the best is that Edison was all about money, profit." If you go to the patent library in DC and look up all of Edison's patents, so when you have a patent for something, there's a drawing, there's a description, there is a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then there is a place underneath the last line is where it's signed by the person who owns the patent, and it's registered and stamped, and so what's really interesting is that you go look at the 19th century before the Civil War, and all the inventions that were done were mostly agrarian inventions, right? The cotton gin, the McCormick Reaper, all that stuff, right? And what's really interesting is that the patent, the drawing, is done like a piece of art. And you can see just by the juxtaposition of the image, I mean, it wasn't done by an engineer, right? So what you see is, and then the writing is really beautiful, descriptive, very feminine. And what you see is that all of these instruments and machines and devices that were developed for farming, which was what the backbone of our economy was until we went into mass production and became an extraction, and that was forced, created, manifested by the Civil War. Civil War was the first industrial war. Some would say the Crimean War because yes, Germany and et al. Had weapons factories, and they were doing that. But in America, that came big time with the Civil War and the railroads. So in before that, all of this stuff that was patented, and these guys got all of the credit and the money. It was women and slaves that invented it, and that's why you had uh, the mother of invention. And so it's right there in front of you that men are basically useless. I mean, yeah, there's some great guys, but again, it falls into that spectrum. Just like our friend KB, started out as a guy, is now as a woman, is in that spectrum there, right? And so I find, like when I had my electric business, I only employed women because they were far better than guys, because they weren't full of themselves. And they didn't, I said, okay, I want this, this, and this, and we're going to do it this way. And if they didn't understand, they said, can you explain that again? And then they'd ask questions. How do you want that done? And I told them, I taught them from the beginning, if you don't understand what I'm saying, ask me again, have me explain it in a different way that you can explain, until we're all on the same page, we're not going to start smashing things up and ripping things apart and da 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 da. And I, turn those women into great electricians. Now, I had about 8 of them. 3 of them became some of the first female master electricians in New York City. The others were artists, and they just wanted that job. They were my friends, and they needed a job, and they like, they saw I was an artist and that I had this skill set as an electrician that I could make money and a good deal of it. And so they went for it. And then they realized that learning that mechanical, technological motif would help them in their art. Like Kiki Smith was one of the, um, you know, folk, my ladies who worked there. And and so women were much better, and women are much more. And I worked for really rich people who wanted everything perfect. So women were much more detail oriented than than guys. Not to say that guys can't be detail oriented. There are a lot that are. I am. I'm a lot of things. You know, I fit in many. I'm not just one place in that spectrum. I like all over the place in that spectrum. And one of the best things I do, and one of the worst things, conversely, is that I can master a skill set. Because the first thing I learned was how to master things, right? And but I do not work. I involve myself in an enterprise. So for 50 years, I was an electrician, not because it made me money. It made me money, but I enjoyed doing it. And it was a team sport, you know. It wasn't just me. I couldn't just do it me. It was the we and me. I had a crew, right? And I loved, sharing my abilities with my crew, and them being women picked it up way better than guys. Now I had a bunch of guys because I taught over 200 people how to be an electrician, and most of them were young folk who were just about to get themselves in trouble where they would end up either dead or in jail. And I would just say, no, 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 no. What are you doing? What do you got that gun for? Well, Bobby told me to run it over to Mickey, and I'm going to get $10 just to run across the block. I said, buddy, you're being set up. This gun has just done a felony. There's going to be a cop waiting for you. You're going to be taken away. You're going to spend 18 to 30 years in jail. So I would take the gun and, take a piece of newspaper or something that I wouldn't put my fingerprints on that gun, and I would throw it down the storm drain, right? And said, come with me. I need a helper today. I'll pay you $10 an hour. They work one day, and I give them $100, and I go, wow. And I said, you want to work tomorrow? Get the same pay? And that was 1968. So I had a lot of young people who I grabbed and kept from dying, getting addicted to drugs, or ending up in jail. And more than 3/4 of them ended up doing okay, getting out of their predicament. And that's why I started taking over abandoned buildings. Put people. They had no place to live. But there were 1.5 million abandoned buildings owned by the state. We used the Homestead Act of 1876 to take those properties, and if you bring them up to code and put, licensed legal electricity, and you're paying an electric bill, that is the gold standard of residency. And if somebody tries to evict you and you have an electric bill, they can't, especially if no one owns that property and you do, using the Homestead Act. And that still exists. The Homestead Act of 1876 still. And that's why corporations take property using eminent domain, even though it has nothing to do for the well-being of the community. So, and every time we would move into a neighborhood, there would be no supermarkets, no stores, no schools, no food, no medical. We had to take care of all of that ourselves, So we had gardens, and today there are over 2,800 gardens. We started them, right? And a New York City school system is feeding the kids through gardens that are in those schools and in those neighborhoods. And the lady who brought that program online was part of our community. And we have the kind of bank that's owned by a credit union. We started our own credit union, And I left New York City in '88, and I came back in 2011 just to go to a wedding. And I stayed around for a week or so and went and saw friends. And I was walking down Avenue A, and this lady came running out and was hugging, Al, you're back, you're back. Where'd you go? You were gone for 30 years. And I said, yeah, I was doing other things. And she goes, do you know what day it is? And I said, I don't know, it's Tuesday. She said, no. This is like the 30th anniversary of the credit union. I go, oh, well, that's great. And she goes, guess how much money is in the bank? I don't know, $1 billion. Oh, that's pretty good. And she goes, it's not cash, in there. That $1 billion is in people's homes, in their businesses, in their college educations. All the money that the bank has is given out to the members as investing in them. And that's why the Lower East Side became the golden gem that it is, just like Soho. Soho was a cesspool, industrial, toxic waste cesspool, and we turned it into, through art, into what it is today, And they have skyscrapers, and my friend who's a big time plumber engineer, it was an artist buddy, one of my best friends. And I have a number of friends that I've had for 50 years. I have a number of girlfriends, female friends with benefits that I've had for 50 years. They've been married, they have kids, grandchildren, and I'm still, their lover boy. And their husbands, if they're still around, they were my friends too. But, I wasn't the marrying type at that moment, and their clock was ticking, but that friendship, that closeness, that love is still there. And that is what makes a community, that kind of love, that polyamorous. And being polyamorous really isn't about sex. It can be about eros, eroticism and that closeness of the body. That's eros. Sex is just reproduction. Oh, what's Edison's new incarnation is Elon Musk, and his dragon. There's a lady who runs his rocket business, and it's her, not Elon. She's the brains, the brilliance. She had worked for, for everybody. She worked for DARPA. She worked for Lockheed. She worked for NASA. Morton Thiokol. She worked for everybody for about 30 years, and then she took over his rocket business, and that's why they went from 0 to 1,000,000 miles an hour, meaning it took NASA 40 years to get a good deliverable system. That lady did it in less than 4 years. She's going to the moon. She's going to Mars. NASA hasn't even, So it's that lady. And you don't really, unless you know about space, and, go read Aviation and Space Weekly, produced by McGraw-Hill. And, what's really interesting, you don't need spies. All you need is a subscription to that magazine, because it states everything, every nut, bolt, you name it, turbine blade on every aircraft, every, when they're developing, the F-22 or the F-16, or it was in that magazine, and designs. And so the Russians get a copy of that. And conversely, the Russians have a magazine that we get that's all about their shit. And that's how, the stealth fighter was designed by the Russians. The algorithm produced was done by a Russian aeronautical engineer in the 50s. The best fighter plane ever built, that still is better than anything we got today, was done by Aero Canada in 1951. And, instead of the crap that the U.S. Air Force and Navy bought, they were going to buy this thing, and basically the politics didn't work out. And basically a few people died, and that company was crushed economically. And Mr. Northrop, he was into flying wings. He developed a flying wing in 1947, 48 that was jet powered, that went faster than the flying wing that we have today, and it was invisible to radar in 1947 because of the shape of the aircraft. And it could carry a larger load than a B 52 and could fly farther than a B 36. It could do 18,000 miles on 1 gallon of gas because it was so efficient. And that was 1947. So it's not a technological issue. And, global warming et al., the moons around Jupiter, there's two of them that are just basically water. And back when we first sent the first space robots to check out our solar system, um, Voyager went by those moons, and they were like an ice cube, right? Well, today, that those moons are no longer an ice cube; they're liquid, and they're around Jupiter, and they are further. Jupiter's further from the sun. It's like 6, parsec is the difference between distance from the Earth to the sun, and Jupiter's like 6 parsecs, and I'm not sure if it's parsecs or whatever the word, but there's an astronomical measurement based on the distance from the sun to the Earth, and the other planets are based on that, right? So Jupiter's 6 times farther from the sun, meaning a lot colder than Earth, and its moons have turned into liquid. And the real issue is what's happening is that the poles are switching in a very large degree. And so Texas is, why Texas had the polar vortex is because the magnetic point of reference of that coldness is changed, right? So, last winter they had, really ridiculously cold, that, vortex came down and froze everyone and nearly, froze their electric grid because it had been, thanks to Bill Clinton and Enron, sliced up like bologna. So no one entity was running it, and no one has invested in the grid because it won't make profit. And back in the day when the grid was first put up there, it was a public utility. Was not put there to be a profit entity. It was there for the well-being of the profit entity. Was our industry was being run on electricity. And then we were selling electrical appliances, and so they needed electricity to do that. So anyway, Texas nearly froze itself, right? And it had a whole year to prepare for this coming winter, which is going to be even colder than last winter because we have an El Nina right now. And so Texas is, so they had, all they spent their political and economic time on was to get rid of abortion, gerrymander the representation, and make laws making it illegal to exert your First Amendment. Unless you remember the KKK, a militia. Those guys can carry a gun for their Second and First Amendment rights and shoot people. The teenager guy, did you see that on TV? It was, I'm so scared. If you look at the video, these guys were chasing him and he tripped over his own feet, fell to the ground. And they were they had this big gun and they were taking it away from him. They weren't, beating him up or doing what the police were doing to the other folk. They were trying to take his gun, and that's why he pulled the trigger, and these guys, morons, were holding the barrel of the gun straight at themselves, and bingo, that's why 2 died and 1 was hurt. And they had videos of this, and when he got up and ran away with his gun, he ran towards the police, and people, he just shot 2 people, he murdered 2 people, and they let him go. And there's videos of the whole thing. And he's probably going to get off, So that's why we are in the NICP, Neo Insane Clown Party. You know, I'm taking. There was a band called Insane Clown Party, and when they would perform, it was pretty raucous. It was pretty much anarchist. It was an anarchist kind of band, but that's where we're at today. So unless you out there in YouTube land start doing things with your community. This last Saturday, a friend of mine, artist friend, who is a great social activist, and she's not like Me Too or Black Lives Matter or any kind of specific group. Her whole thing is peace, love, and understanding and communication. That's what she does. All these events. She does do environmental events, but she's done Earth Day here in Roanoke. In Roanoke, not here because this ain't Roanoke. Um, for at least 20 years. And she was like Hercules. She would do it virtually by herself because there would be these collectives and coalitions of what I call the usual sock puppets. There were a number of people who would basically just have meetings and never do any real organizing, getting it ready. She did it all herself. I would help her, and a few other of her friends would help her. But the people who were there who would say, we're organizers, no, I used to call them just the usual suspects. And that's what's happened to the union movement in America and any progressive. I mean, I can't even use the term progressive. It makes me want to vomit because it isn't progressive, right? It's not moving forward, right? It's what was known back in the day as Stalinist obstructionist, AOC and that, and what do they call it? The Hood, the Klan, the whatever that crew is, Bernie and the club. They are a joke. And let's see, what else are we saying here? Be great to see you and Joe on Joe. Yeah, tell Joe to hire me. I mean, to get me on the show. I want to go on anybody's show, do anything. I mean, when I first started doing this, it's pretty amazing. When I leave, when I hit the little end stream button down below and then hit the other thing to close it out, it gives me all the analytics. How many people has watched, how many people were on the chat, how many hours, right? So, like the one I did the other night, when I looked at the analytics, it said 78 people watched. And I was on for like an hour, like right now, hour and 28. It was about an hour and 48 minutes. And the accumulated time that all those people watched it was 16 hours. It was about an hour and 40 minutes the show was, but it was 16 hours, meaning instead of people just jumping in and go, oh, what's going on? And go on to the next thing. A good 10 or so people watched the whole thing or more, right? And so, and when I ended the show, there were 8 to 15 thumbs up, right? And there were, and the analytics had 78 people watched it, and the little thing of how many people were on the chat watching it was about 15. And so the next day when I went and looked, and it was posted, it was up there, but when I saw what it said on the bottom line, it said there was 1 thumbs up instead of the 8, and that there were 6 thumbs down when there were none, and there were only 4 people who watched the show for less than the hour 40 minutes. That's what they do to my algorithm, So back when I first started doing it and I was having that kind of response, I went from 0 to 300 subscribers within a number of weeks. And I was moving forward, and YouTube got a hold of me and said, hey, you're really great. We want to put you on the top of the algorithm. We want to make you rich and famous. We want to own you. I said, own me? Like a slave? I said, well, not me. No, you're going to be rich and famous. No. No, what we want to own is we want to control the narrative. We want you to tell your stories, but we don't want you to talk about the social dynamics that you talk about. Tell the stories, tell the old clone story. Just don't fit in the social dynamics. You know, tell the story about, what you did here, there, and everywhere. Just don't put the social dynamics in. And I said, well, I'm really flattered. Let me think about it, and let's cross the i's, cross the t's. Let's have a contract. I want to. Anyway, I kind of dragged it out to the point where they said, okay. After about 6 months, I said, you right now say yes or no. If you don't say yes, if you say maybe, it's going to be a no because we're going to restrict you. We're not going to knock you off the thing. We're not going to get rid of you, but no one will watch you. And so I'm getting above 500. And most of you do watch. So I'm more about the quality. And there are a number of folk here who were, when I first started off, were trolls, right? And they're not anymore. They have changed their life. And there are a lot of people I talk to on my email account. And so if you want to get a hold of me, it's the dude awake 42 at Gmail. And, they want to, I want to learn magic. I want to learn. No, I'm sorry. No. What you need to do is get a grip on your life. You have to be the decider of your life. You have to be conscious, intent, I am. You have to be conscious, aware, I am. You have to be patient, and you have to be humble, and you have to have unconditional forgiveness. Do that? I can help you with that. But all the other stuff, magic is just another man's technology, and that technology is just another man's religion. So these are all subjective realities that really don't matter. And it just, if you hook your star to these subjective realities, all you're doing is basically incarcerating yourself in the illusion of ego. Right? And I write a lot, and there's this thing called Blogspot. Before Google bought it, it used to be really easy to use and really easy to access. And my little thing was called xratted.blogspot.com. And now, every time you type that in, it says X-rated, and then Blogspot says, "Oh, we don't do pornography, right?" And the pornography I was talking in my stories was about the corporate structure, right? So I'm doing the task that I was sent to do. And the fact that I have over 150 people who I interact with as their sensei, as their teacher, and listen to what's going on in their life, not be Mr. Shrinky Shrink, but just say, think about this. Why don't you try that? Why don't you read this book? You know, and a good book I would suggest everyone to read. Go online and find The Course in Miracles, and there's the textbook, there's the workbook, and there's the teacher's book. And there's a lot of amazing information in there. And if you read that, and it's very Christian in a lot of ways, but it's also very Islamic and very Hebrewic and very Buddhist and very Vishnuic. It's all the same because it's all the burning bush as a work in progress and viewing the human experience as the mirror to navigate that work in progress. And that's why, end times ain't coming anytime soon. I'm not saying things are going to be hunky dory tomorrow, but they could be, if we were to serve love's co-creation instead of our ego, if we realized that our lives weren't about us, but about the we and me, and that instead of being an extractive mine, money, more money, instead of that, realizing that we belong to all our relations. So, That's about it for me tonight. I've been on here 1:35. So let's see what people are saying. I'm gonna get off at 1:40. Let's see. Well, turn some, go tell Joe Rogan to watch the show and get a hold of me at the dude awake 42 at Gmail. I'd be glad to. I got WhatsApp. I talk to people all over the world on WhatsApp. And so I'm up for it, And Joe Rogan's all right, I mean, he wouldn't be where he is if he wasn't, working for the man. But and when you work for the man, I work for the man, you know, in lots of different, as a, itinerant scholar. I spent 30 years, not as in a scholastic, but a scholar. I ran around the world and looked at things and gave my opinion of what was going on. And my opinion was valued, that they paid me pretty good money for that, and sent me, I spent a good 30 years in universities running research programs, right? And I got more degrees on a thermometer because of that. And virtually all of those, I did not matriculate. I'd be working on a program and I would be doing this one little chunk over here, but I would be the one person who kind of stayed through the whole program because I started writing the protocols. And by a certain point, I was running these programs. And the people who were at that university, who were the overseers of it for people like Bechtel and for Brookings and Rockefeller Foundation and other entities like that, DARPA and other corporations, um, they would at certain points say, you're kind of running this whole thing. And we're getting to this point where the people who've given us money to do this are going to start wanting to look at the data. And you're the person who built the strategies for this. So, and if we tell them that you don't even have a undergrad, well, I had an undergraduate degree, but in theater arts and philosophy and ancient languages, I don't know. And so they would just give me degrees. I have 3 master's degrees and a PhD and about 4 undergraduate degrees because to give me the gravitas to work for these guys, they had to say, see, he's got that degree. He was over here. He studied over there. He studied with this guy. He studied with that guy. And I did, I did, study with Joseph Campbell, I did study with Dr. Quigley, you know, and and other people, you know, and I was like the Forrest Gump of scholarship because I didn't need to be the boss, even though I may be running this program or doing that or writing that protocol or whatever. I didn't need to be the guy on stage. And I had been the guy on stage a few times. I was telling a friend of mine when I was at the UN and I helped put together this NGO called Alternative Technologies. And we would, like, I think the best thing we did in 1973 or 4 was one of the biggest problems was potable water in Africa and other third world countries, South America and places of that nature. And millions of people were dying from diarrhea, and especially kids. And so the real issue was potable water, right? And so and that's getting even worse because what's happening to wells all around the world is that they're becoming brackish, meaning salt water is leaching in to the groundwater of the non-salt water groundwater, and that's already a big problem in certain places, island nations and other places, low-lying coastlines. But anyway, one day I had this really nice office I shared with 4 of the folk, and it was this little narrow office, and we had these gigantic. We were like pushed up against the windows, and so we would be toasty. Um, and so one day I was thinking about this groundwater problem and all these kids dying of not having clean water to drink. And another problem was there were millions of 2 liter soda bottles all over Africa, right? And they were just littering everywhere, just like the plastic bags from supermarkets today and straws, right? So, and the little plastic beads that are destroying our oceans, So I was thinking about these 2 liter clear soda bottles, and I got a bunch, right? And I started playing with them. And I took one out, in the garden area of above the FDR driveway at the United Nations. And there were areas where, because it was over the highway, the grass would die from all the pollution from the cars, and also the Con Ed coal plant right next door on 16th Street. And the ground would sink because there was nothing holding it, no grass holding it. And then they put stone over it, and then so anyway, it was like always, whenever it rained, there'd always be a puddle of really icky, crappy coal, power plant, car, tirey, disgusting water and garbage. Plus, there was a place, a garbage, where the garbage trucks would dump the garbage, and then they would bulldoze it onto a barge, and they would take it out to sea and dump the garbage into the sea. Anyway, so that was this place, and I would go over there and get that water, and then I would send it off to this lab. It was Rockefeller, nonprofit institute was right next to the UN, and the property that the UN was on was Rockefeller property, and the architect who built the UN was Rockefeller's architect, and the Rockefeller Foundation gave the UN $150 million aid to build the building and to start the institution and to run it for the first 5 years before they got other countries to pay for it, right? So I had this laboratory right over there, and also there were 2 other really interesting research facilities. Carnegie Mellon was there, and the cancer folks were there, John Hopkins, and so we had relationships with a lot of their research people, and we would come in and help them with their kind of projects from our point of view, and they would because they had really great laboratories. So anyway, I would collect this water, and I would get like 10 gallons of it, right? And I would send off a control off to those guys, right, to say what originally was in it, right? And then what I would do is I would take a clear 2 liter bottle and pour the crappy water into it, and then put it out into the sun. And the next day, I would take a little funnel with some cheese, stuff for a filter, cheesecloth, and I would pour that into the next. So all the gunky shit wasn't going into that one. And then the next day, I would have my little funnel and a little more cheesecloth and pour that in there. And I would constantly keep it in the sun, right? So by the 4th day, I would take samples, because I had more than one bottle of controls, and I would send it off those labs and see how that water was doing. And after 4 days, that really crappy, toxic, had every kind of biological gook in it, was potable water by just filtering it and putting it in sunlight. And the clear plastic let the UV go through and kill all the bugs. So we went to UNICEF and said, here's a protocol. Tell the people to go collect all those bottles and just fill it up with any old water and have a little funnel or whatever, to pour it from one to the other, and use a sock or whatever you can use to filter the gook out, and just do it for 4 days. You'll have potable water. So we did that. And within the first 3 years, 2 million children didn't die. Right? By simply doing that. No big project, no big anything, no infrastructure, no supersonic jet planes, no engineers, no factories, no desalinization plants, no nuclear reactors to run the desalinization plants. No. Just a 2-liter soda bottle that was basically garbage. So that went on for about 4 years, and it was going like gangbusters until the manufacturers who made those bottles put a material into the soda bottle to block the UV from going into the water and killing the bugs. And then 3 years later, the mortality rate of those kids went back up. We saved about 4.5 million children over that 5-year period. And that's just a little story of the modality and principality of this, what I call the hidden hand. And they have an agenda. If you go to the Georgia Stones, the Georgia Stones basically state they want a slave race of 500 million people servicing that 1/10 of 1%. 90,000 people who own and rule the world. And there's really 40 people who are the top 0.02%. Right? The rest are billionaires, but they're more middlemen. Like Elon Musk, Moron Boy, Facebook, all of those folks are just, Bill Gates. They're just poster kids. They all went to the same prep school. They all mind controlled, right? They're all robots. They're all reptiles. Go read David Icke. Go read Joseph P. Farrell. Read Catherine Austin Fitz. Right? Go see Truly Graceful on YouTube. She does a great job of telling. I tell stories. She is truly an artist as a journalist. She really gets all the facts, dots the I's, crosses the T's, and she does it in such a graceful way. And there's a number of other people. The guy who had Crow House, his name will pop into my head, but he's no longer around. I don't know what they did with him, but he wouldn't stop. He wasn't as jovial or entertaining than me. He was going after them. And another person who's done a great job is what's his name? He really came up with what was going on with the COVID-19. Cliff High, H-I-G-H, Cliff High. He had and now he's on some platform that I can't even find, but people send me links to him. But he used to be on YouTube, and he did a great job on explaining eggs. And he started out in 2019 saying, "Hey, something's coming up. I see something happening. I'm putting the dots together. There's a pandemic coming. It's manufactured. This is biological warfare. Da 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 da." No, I can't tell you that. I don't know. I'm not as smart as Cliff. And Cliff spent his whole life being a computer programmer, developing modeling for DARPA. Modeling like nuclear war, chemical war, biological war, modeling, you name it, he modeled it. And so he is still on the net somewhere, and he's still going, and he's now got a really interesting thing describing the sociological goings on as normie world and woo-woo world. So he's pretty interesting to go see. So what do you guys think? And Jesse says, there are so many things here in the USA that are allowed as food that are not allowed as food items in other countries. Yep, they're, GMOs, you name it. And just the poisons that are allowed, and it's just the FDA, not doing their job, especially when through all of those governmental entities that are supposed to protect us. I mean, a good example is the Boeing 737, right? The aircraft that crashed twice was a totally different aircraft, but the FAA allowed Boeing to do, the administrative work of what the FAA should have been doing, right? And that's why that aircraft was allowed to fly. It was certified, meaning Boeing certified it itself and cut every corner they could. And there are other aircraft, the 777. I mean, a whole bunch of aircraft have been really just. Boeing used to be well known for making a product that was amazingly well built and well engineered and well designed. And I'm a real aerospace kind of guy. And aircraft are quite interesting because they're either a dog or they're either terrible, crappy dog or a greyhound. It's like they're either like the F-16 is like an amazing aircraft, right? Whereas the F-15, the F-111, F-4 is an amazing aircraft because they're like just a sports car, beautiful. And both the F-4 and the F-16 were built to be amazingly superior aircraft, but not be really expensive, that you could mass produce a shitload of them. And the A-10 Warthog, the most amazing ground attack aircraft ever friggin' built. And they want to get, the Air Force keeps, Lockheed and those guys keep trying to kill it, but they can't make an aircraft that's half as good as it, right? It just was perfect. Those three aircraft were just made perfect, right? The super spy plane, the 71. That's another one. It was built in the 1950s, 7 times the speed of sound. I was with my father at Edwards, and they were vectoring this aircraft in, and he was like 30 seconds from landing, and then all of a sudden he was over Hawaii. Oops, I hit the wrong button. Sorry. And half the stuff that people see up in the sky, they think are flying. Those large triangles are ours. Boom. Let's see. Yes, the military Olympics in Wuhan, right? That's where Cliff saw this happening. And the fact that in Italy, why Italy became ground zero for this is that the Chinese have brought up all the, fancy handbag and artifact things in Italy, and they bring the slave labor of the Chinese to Italy so they can put on the handbag made in Italy instead of saying made in China. And there was this, Chinese holiday that happened right where everyone got infected, and they brought like 3,000 workers back to Italy, and they were all sick, right? And what this JD is talking about is there was an Olympics, a military Olympics in Wuhan, and each, like 500, whatever amount of countries there are that have big militaries, they had each one, like the United States, England, France, you name it, each had like 200 people at this Olympics. And they were in Wuhan, and they were there for a long time, and they walked all over the place, ate everywhere, saw everything, and everyone was getting sick at the Olympics. They weren't even just getting sick back home. And then they set a quarantine, and everyone flew back to their different countries. So this has all been, like you have to realize this hidden hand thing isn't any specific national. It's a transnational world we live in. When you talk about globalism, New World Order, blah, 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 that's what it is. But it has been around since Babylon. It's not just happening these last few years. It's just becoming quite evident. Aspartame is used as a flame retardant. Yes, in clothes, in children's clothes. Yep. It's used as a flame retardant, but it's used as a sugar substitute in sodas, right? And that's, all these people who are dying like flies, like out there in the deep green, the holler state of Tennessee, people, all they eat is mac and cheese doodles, and Mountain Dew, and they die at 36. And so you have to also realize that there's I forgot a lady's name, but her website is stopthecrime.org. And she was a real estate lady in California, and all of the fires and everything, she just started to realize that it wasn't that, global warming was making that, there was something else going on. And this lady was indomitable, and she, saw that it was microwave, space-based energy weapons causing the fires in California, and and that the chemtrails were seeding the ground to be more volatile, and they had you know helicopter drones dropping these little pellets all over where the fires would go nuts. So go look her up, because she really, once she got into that, she went totally, she tripled down on everything that's going on. And another really good thing, and this is, go look at architects and engineers for 9/11 truth. The U.S. government wasn't even going to have an investigation into 9/11, but the 3,000 or so people whose families died, they were so pissed off, they were screaming and yelling and jumping up and down, so they had to have a congressional investigation, which was, based kind of on the Kennedy assassination, just a total whitewash. But it was very interesting because this was a quite, engineering, technical thing to say what brought the two towers down and what brought Building 7 down and what the, so if you have two towers and then you have Building 7, that means there are like 4 or 5 other buildings, right? And they were all damaged. And you never saw any pictures of them because they were so surreal. There were these, so Building 7 was this, like, 50, 60, it had as much square feet as the towers did, but instead of going up, it went sideways. And it was like sandwiched in those little streets down near what used to be Radio Row. And so what brought down Building 7? I mean, just, controlled demolition, because it didn't get hit by an airplane, really didn't get hit by anything. So what caused the fire? Why did that, how did the fire bring those buildings down? And if they did have a controlled demolition, those things usually take months to prepare. You just can't bring it. And because it was near so many other buildings, this thing just came straight down, didn't tip over, didn't knock into any. There were buildings that were like 4 or 5 feet away that, were owned by rich people who didn't want their building to be hurt or damaged. And, Bernie, who bought, the two towers, and all he did was put $5 million down. He got a really, he's going to pay, I think, 100 and something $1 million for the two of them, but he got $1 billion each insurance policy. So when those buildings came down, and he had only owned those buildings for 6 months, and he got like close to $3 billion. So all of these things are happening all around us, and we never even, spend any time to look at it. So, who the federal government, I mean, they have all kind of national laboratories. I mean, really amazing scientists studying everything. Did they go to those guys to say, hey, investigate why these buildings came down? Because there were a lot of, strangeness about the whole thing, because the buildings fell faster than gravity, and they all fell straight down, and filled the basement. to a point, and turned everything into dust. Half of the volume of those buildings blew off in the air. And that's why they could move. They moved virtually all of the evidence and took it to China within 6 months, or less. And it was never investigated as a crime scene. And the police and a lot of people were quite upset about that. And yet, all we got for it was the Patriot Act and 20 years of war. And we have the karmic debt of killing over 2 million people in the Arab Spring neck of the woods. So the only way we can fight this, I have friends who are like, been fighting this, forever, and really all they're doing is jerking off. It's all about them. I had to talk with Governor so and so, and I talked to Senator so and so, and it's all about we have to have a better public radio has to be really. You think media is going to? Yeah, yes, an informed public would be nice, but it's never going to happen as long as 6 corporations own 98% of all the media, even the public media. You look at, listen to public radio, watch public TV, and virtually they have commercials. This is brought to you by Exxon Mobil. Come on, guys. Wake up. The only way you can change this is that in every day and every way, you have to be nice to everyone you come in contact with. And you have to do something culturally. You have to start a coffee house, a salon, art gallery. Start going to public schools and tutoring kids, going to old folks' homes. And, that's what's going to change this world. Not any marches, not any, alternative political structures, because they'll just be bought out. Because you look at the last 115 years of social political dynamic, it's it's like Monsanto, GMO'd the political structure. We have a monoculture in our political structure. We have a monoculture in our media. We have a monoculture, in our food manufacturing. And that is not healthy. If you know anything about biology, diversity is the key to health. So that's where we're at right now. And yet there is great potential for positive change. You just have to get involved. Friend in Canada. Okay, we read that one. The next one. America became too secure in trusting the leadership. We forgot what the Constitution stands for. Well, again, Constitution stands for rich white men controlling everything. But the articles of, the amendments were passed for the people, because the people weren't going to go along for the Constitution. They just thought it was another piece of shit. So it wasn't until, the amendments came along in a process of being able to tag things on. And Jefferson had a great idea. He wanted it so you could not stay in office more than 10 years, period. You couldn't go away and then come back again. No, 10 years, that was it. And every law that was written had to be sundowned after 8 years. We have laws on the books that have been there almost 200 years because they were put there for reasons of keeping the status quo going. Oh, it's so hard. We have all these laws we put in that are totally racist, sexist, and anti-human, anti-life. Back in the 90s, and it's so hard to change it now. No, sorry, you can do that. But no one's, they're gerrymandering everything. Right? No longer is the white race the dominant race in America. People of color, and there are more people of color than there are. And America's always been an immigrant nation. And why there are 11 million illegal aliens in America is because we needed them to pick our food. We needed them to work in really crappy jobs like, animal slaughtering and butchering, and other dangerous things. And we need them to mow our lawn. But now that robots are, in about 5 years, robots are going to take over 80% of all the labor in the United States. And manufacturing is going to come back here, big time. But it'll be all cars are already manufactured 70% by robots, and robots. And the interesting thing that robots are going, any job that is repetitive in activity is perfect for a robot. So you know who's going to be the ones being made redundant? Lawyers and doctors, because both of their jobs are very redundant, right? And and they spend all this time in school and think they're really smart and irreplaceable, and they're going to be the first guys to go, along with truck drivers and anything done on an assembly line. So, and we are going to see them to roll out Tesla's wireless transmission, because with that we'll be able to go straight into robots. Because if you had to plug in your robot, no, and have batteries, no. But if they were, constantly online, constantly getting juice by induction rather than, you know, being in a circuit, So next 5 years, that's what you're going to see. You're not going to own anything. There's going to be no cash. And if you're not a good gooby, you're not, you're going to be walking. You're going to have to be like me, eat dandelions. Let's see. Yep, people got lazy, and about 1,000 years from now, people, the scholars like me will go, so why did that empire fall? Why did, we can look at Rome and Greece and Mesopotamia and Spain and England, and that pretty much all of them fell because they fell from within. They collapsed within, in that they expanded their empire so far out, and then they had to have armies to keep their power structure, that it cost them a lot of money. It's just like us. We're spending trillions of dollars a year. We do not need, we're all upset that China is like being militaristic. They have this little hubcap of a aircraft carrier. One. We have 11. We have 11. Gerald Ford, they have like, 15,000 people on board. It's like a floating city. And around it are 20 other ships. They are like, each one of those aircraft carrier groups are like a navy unto themselves. And, and China is only wanting to have their little navy in what is known as the China Sea, and we have over 60 military bases all the way around China and in Russia. We made a deal with Russia, that when the curtain came down and Russia fell apart, we weren't going to rush NATO into people like Poland and Ukraine. Ukraine used to be for years Russia. The others were, Lithuania and places like Yugoslavia were like satellite states. But anyway, so all those countries became part of the EU and part of NATO. And now Russia is surrounded right on their frigging border. We don't have anybody, Cuba's the closest thing, and they don't really have a military. Now their medical folk are, they're, we are numbered. We spend more money on our health care, and yet a quarter of the people in America have no health care whatsoever. 50% of all children have no health care whatsoever. We are number 48, and we spend more than anybody else. We spend $2 trillion on health care. you know, I've been watching TV, but now I can. And I was watching this one channel, that's like the Murder She Wrote kind of channel where all the old folks are watching it. Every frigging commercial is for Cialis or some really, and this will kill you if you take it, but it's there for a rash. You're taking this thing that's going to destroy your immune system, so you don't have a little scabby thing over here. Really? Let's see. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I studied for 30 years, the unwritten human history. You should go read Dr. Quigley's. I studied with him at Georgetown. He wrote a really great book called Hope and Tragedy, or something close to that. And a fellow student of Quigley's was a guy named Gary Allen, who wrote a really great book called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. And he basically, his thesis is that Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives are just two wings of the same fascist corporate bird. And it's quite a good book. Like I said, Joseph P. Farrell, he has World War II down. Like Catherine Austin Fitz she worked for HUD for Fannie and Fred, and the information is right in front of us. You just want to read it. It's online. David Icke, he can be a little bit much, but he's trying to get it out there. And I have to hand it to those people because they have spent their whole lives focused on their one thing. Me, I spent my whole life, mastering 20 different things and having a good time and helping people along the way. That's my way, is to help people along the way, right? To waken people up. Now, I've been writing a lot the last 2 years, because I was the poster child of being, self stuck away. And because I live out in the middle of nowhere, so I didn't see anybody. So I was as quarantined as you could get. And I had really, I was eating everything out of the woods and out of my garden. And I have really amazingly clean water. And there's nobody around me no car emissions, no. I mean, yes, there is chemtrails falling on me, but other than that, I'm a lot cleaner than most. So, yep, Dr. Quigley and Dr. Adams. Yeah, Jessica, you are quite the scholar yourself. Jessica, do me a favor and get a hold of me at the dudeawake42@gmail, so we can have a little mano conversation. And anybody else who wants to, I have about 150 folk that I got from doing my YouTube thing that are like Jessica here, that are truly like energetically. I see you, Jessica. You're on the beam, girl. And you're a girl, right, Jessica? And that's. I mean, I have no idea half the gender of the cadre. Yes, sir. And all you guys have to do out there is have a good time. Get a cadre together, Start working in your own neighborhoods. Like I said, start a salon, start a coffee shop, start a thing that helps people. Out in the deep green, when I first moved out there 20 years ago, it was as isolated as you could get. And because it was the Sawtooth Mountain Range, I called it the accordion between the Appalachian and the Blue Ridge. And there were no roads, and it was that whole area had been truck farms, and it was rainforest, and it really grew. It was like the Garden of Eden, and they all had terraced fields, and they made amazing, great vegetables. And in the county seat, Birdseye and Jolly Green Giant and all those guys had freezer guys. So these truck guys would truck their beautiful vegetables, and in 2000 and no, not 2000, 1971, the average truck farmer was making $28,000 a year out there an hour, and there were 19,000 people out there. right? And that $28,000 today would be about 200 grand or more, right? Today, the average folk out there are like me. They they live on $3,000 to $7,000 dollars um, a year, and there are 20 instead of 19,000 people living there. There's 2,400. So and now the rich are coming in and gentrifying everything. So back in the day, when Monsanto and Bayer came in and pretended to be this company called Maymead, and they turned this unbelievable diverse ecology into a mono ecology of um, GMO food, corn, feed corn, soybeans, Christmas trees, and tobacco. Um, they and destroyed the water table of that side of the lake and that side of. And you wouldn't even want to go swimming in the lake anymore. It's like just deadly. And but where I was, it was there's no satellite, no cable, no cell phone, no none of that. Well, in 8 months, they have totally fiber optic that whole neck of the woods, and all the fiber optics are going into rich gated communities and rich uh, restaurants and rich businesses like uh, Dollar General. And so when I moved there 20 years ago, there were all these families that were truck farmers, but that kind of was being gotten rid of by Monsanto and Bayer and Maymead. And so they had all these fields, so they kept growing stuff, and they turned their houses into general stores, right? And it was really great because you could, like there was one general store that was less than a mile from my front door, and I could walk down there with a nice big canvas bag, and they'd have amazing vegetables that were amazingly cheap, and they would have the toilet paper, the ketchup and stuff, dishwashing detergent, whatever you kind of needed. And some of those stores really had a lot of stuff, so they were like their own version of Walmart's, and way cheaper than Walmart's. And so in that 20 years, um, Dollar General 8 years ago moved in and strategically placed 8 of their stores and put all those 20 stores out of business. And each one of those mom and pop holler general stores had amazingly organic vegetables and everything else you needed. And they employed between 10 and 20 people. Right? Dollar General, their business plan is to employ 3 people a store, period. And pay them as little as possible and work them to death. And what happens is tractor trailer comes in, the sides roll up, and hydraulically the shelves are lowered and rolled into the store, and the empty shelves are rolled and put back in that truck. And it's all done by robots. I mean, they don't need people rolling the shelves into the store. It's all done by robots. I mean, everything, there's nobody touching anything. It's all programmed. There's little wires outside into the store, and the little shelves have little motors on the wheels, and they just roll right in there and lock themselves in there, and people take the stuff out. 3 people. So instead of employing, 20 stores by 20, so 10 times 20 is what, 200. So like instead of having 400 to 1,000 people employed in the county, in the 3 counties, they only employ 60 people. Instead of all that money staying in the 3 counties, all the money leaves. And that's what's happening to America. And if you watch Steven Spielberg's Player One, Spielberg is there to give the population a heads up of what's coming. And so when it does happen, they aren't really freaked out because, it was in Steven Spielberg's movie. And same with the guy who did Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry. He was part of JPL. He was part of that whole crew of the guy who started Scientology. That guy was at JPL, and a number of other people who were Satanists, and just guys who were followers of Albert Pike. Um, and it's like I said, this is a soap opera. It's and the script was written 400 years ago, and it was published. It's not like this stuff is hidden. This is pretty right in your face. All the movies are about it. It's like so. But the easy peasy way of dealing with this is through love's co-creation. Anything egocentric, not going to work. So what else is JD saying? NICP, yep. Neo Insane Clown Party. There was a man we used to buy hay from. He developed a carburetor for cars and trucks that would allow you to get 100 miles. Yeah, okay, so here's a good story on that. So I went to this school called Cooper Union, right? And I went, and my mentor, Grandpa Stahl, who had the first master electrician's license in the United States, he was Nikola Tesla's bench electricians, meaning he manufactured all the gizmos that Tesla went into, dreamt about, and then came and made a picture and said, here, like, build this, and he did. And he also started the IBEW, International Brotherhood of Electric Workers. So the Stahl family were the essence of electricity in New York City, right? And a really amazing. So they had a really interesting. They had a non-union shop and a union shop. And when I was a kid, I kept blowing stuff up in my parents' apartment, and my mom got tired of it and walked me down Third Avenue and came into the first electric shop, went in there, and that was Mike. So there was Mike Jr. and Mike Sr. Mike Sr. was Grandpa, and Mike Jr. was Mike. He hated being called Jr., so he got to be called Mike, and Mike Grandpa's soul was Grandpa. So anyway, my mom walks me in there, do something, I can't take it. So Mike had 5 daughters, had no sons. He looks at me, and in his head, he goes, here, finally got a son. So why they had a shop like on 3rd Avenue and 59th Street was the center of the new construction, and he was one of the larger union shops in New York City. And so instead of having the shop all the way downtown, and so for people, the contractors and architects, and instead of having to go all the way, he was like within a couple of blocks of all the big jobs he was working on. So he bought a building and put his shop right on the street level, right? And walked in. And that's how my mom walked through that door with me at hand. And that's when Mike goes, oh, yes. So he, I hang out there, and I'm only, like 6 blocks from my parents' house. So I could walk there without my mom having to take me there. Because back in the day, in the late 50s, early 60s, you could do that. And you still could do that. Even in the 70s, when things were deadly, you could still do that. Anyway, so I start working there, and Mike is treating me more like my father than my own father, right? My dad said to me at 6, when I came back from my grandma taking care of me for the first 6 years of my life, he looked at me and he honestly said, who are you? You're not one of us. You don't belong here. You know how wrong that is, within the construct of a personality characteristic building, in psychology. That's like the worst thing you could ever do to a 6-year-old. Say, you don't belong. You're we don't know you. You're not one of us. Get out. But I was brought up by my grandma, so I just looked at my dad and said, "What kind of asshole is this? What's his problem?" It didn't bother me at all. I was like, "Go ahead. I have nothing to do with you guys," and I didn't. And so at 9, I got back there at 6. At 9, I had a job, and Mike got me a Social Security number, and he got me a checking account. He just kept putting money into it, right? Because in New York City, you have to have 16 consecutive years of W-2 forms. And you could have them like for 15 years, you get sick, you didn't have that 16, you got to start over again. And that's how it's like on the arm. It's like all stuck. So, and all these families who were electricians, they wrote the laws, right? Mike Saul wrote the law, So my first 3 years working there, after I hung with Mike Jr., but he was always busy with these gigantic projects, and I couldn't work on those as a 9-year-old. But I could go downtown to where Grandpa's shop was, and he did all of the fixing of the old factories that were what was Soho. Soho was a factory neck of the woods. Anyway, so I did that, and what was I telling you about the stalls? Oh yes, Cooper Union. So when I was 16, Mike said, you need to study electrical engineering, but you don't need to get that degree. You just need to study it. So you need to be understanding the nomenclature. I mean, you already understand. I've already told you, taught you what you need to know in electrical engineering, but you need to get that scholastic experience. I said, okay. So he walks me into the president of Cooper Union and says, okay, Bob, he's going to school here. He's going to study electrical engineering. Cooper Union was really an amazing school because it was all about being a community. And you went to that school for free. No one paid anything. They were so well endowed. Cooper was this guy who invented a little gizmo for steam engines and made $1 zillion. And Union was an English, landscape painter. So they were both pretty famous, pretty well off. They got married, had kids, and they started the school. And they wanted it to be an enlightened blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Grandpa takes me in there and goes, he's going to school here, and he's going to study electrical engineering. So they had an engineering school, they had an architectural school, and they had an art school. And if you studied architecture, you had to study art, and you had to study engineering. If you were taking engineering, you had to study architecture. And so you were this well-rounded kind of student. And it wasn't scholastic, it was scholarship. Really, and community. It was really amazing. So anyway, first day I go to school, I'm 16. Everybody else is 21. They're all wearing, the electrical engineer look, black pants, white shirt, little black tie, slide rule to the hip. I'm just in there in my red kicks and shorts and, a T-shirt and a cowboy hat and mirrored sunglasses. And the guy is so full of himself, he doesn't even turn around. He's smoking a cigar and a pipe. And he's going on, and he's showing us a field equation, right? And he turns around and he goes, any questions? And everyone's scared to ask a question. I put my hand up, and he kind of looks at me. He goes, yeah, what do you want? And I say, right off the bat, I don't ask a question. I go, that equation is wrong. And he is so floored by this guy in shorts and red kicks and a T-shirt and a cowboy hat and mirrored sunglasses. And I walk right by him, take the eraser, and I erase half the equation apart. And I say, you need this part, you need this part. And I draw little arrows over here, and you put them together this way, and you divide them by this number. And you get the answer over here. And it gives you the answer before the decimal point and about 4 points after the decimal point. You don't need to take it to 32 points. This is called a field equation because it's done in the field. It's an arithmetic equation that is a multidimensional equation, meaning it's a computer algorithm before computers. So it was done with both algebra and trigonometry to figure out the bias of the transformer. So you have to tune super high voltage. We ever see the transmission lines on those big towers, and then they go into the erector set. It's a distribution node for high voltage. And to get those transformers to work, you have to tune them like an instrument, and you need to use a field equation. So I showed them how to do it, and you don't need to take a 32 decimal points that away. It's just the first 3 to 6 is all you need. And you can do it this way and do it like that. And I show him like that, and he's like shitting, he's turning red, and he's like, because he's been an electrical engineer for 30 years. He's 50-something years old. And here's a guy, and he's wearing a suit. Everyone else is wearing black pants, white shirt, little black tie, and their slide rule on their hip. Me, No, not so much. And I just showed him what a stupid moron he is. And he throws me out, right? And then, calls up the head office and said, get rid of this kid. So I am escorted back to the, chancellor of the whole university. And he looks at me and he just kind of shakes his head and he goes, Al, I knew you were a smart kid. But you need to realize that you cannot tell a 50-year-old guy who's been doing this for 30 years, who thinks he's the god of electrical engineering. He's on some committee of the IEEE, and you better him and you're 16 years old. You can't do that. And I said, but I'm looking for the truth. He was stupid, full of shit, hypocrite, and scaring the crap out of those students to the point they're going to be useless as engineers. He goes, yes, but that's how it rolls. That's engineering in America today. And he goes, but we have this new department that I think you're going to be perfect for. And that department was called alternative technologies, right? So I show up, and the professor there, he's wearing a suit too, but it looks like he hasn't gotten. It's like these clothes. I have not been out of them since June, because I have no place to wash them, right? And they don't get too dry. I don't really smell. I haven't taken it. I mean, I'm taking a shower here now because I love showers. I'm taking like 2 a day, but living out in the green, I haven't taken a shower between Christmas Eve and last week. I haven't had a shower. So anyway, I show up to this classroom, and there's 2 or 3 guys in black pants, white shirt, little black tie, and they've like lost, the tie is now loose, and their slide rule isn't like a weapon. And our teacher is really he's actually smoking what is known as a spliff, right, in his pipe. Instead of cigar, he's smoking a spliff. And he is, showing us some pretty interesting stuff, right? And this is the first day of class, and he goes, listen, so this is where it's at. No test, no quiz, no textbook, no nothing. We're going to study certain dynamics of alternative technology, and we're going to go from there. And this whole semester, and he goes, we're going to break up in study groups. So everyone get in line and count off, right? And this group in the back, who kind of look, they were like in their 20s, and, they weren't wearing shorts like I was. I always wore shorts. And they weren't wearing kicks. I was, always had kicks. They were in T-shirts, and they all wore mirrored sunglasses. So I knew that they were my people. And they didn't get in the line. And I kind of didn't get in the line. I just kind of went over to them and said, hey, how you doing, boys? And they looked at me and said, you're one of us. And so basically we had 6 working groups, right? And he goes, engineering is all about community. It's not about individuals coming up with the eureka idea. It's a group of people working together and sharing and caring and being a team, So we were the team, and but we were definitely, those guys were always smoking pot. They all had joints and pipes in the back of it. So that classroom smelled like skunk works, it's like, and that's why, Lockheed's top engineering thing is called the skunk works. Why is it called the skunk? Because those guys smoke so much boo. Anyway, I diverge. So anyway, we have this one project, and it's our whole grade, and that is we have to think of something that will save the world, right? So we're going to class and we're having fun, and we, I'm an electrician, artist, 16-year-old guy, still going to prep school. So, and I have my own apartment, and my roommate is Alan Ginsberg, and I'm the head electrician at Fillmore East and at Carnegie Hall and at Vivian Beaumont Theater and Lincoln Center, and for Herbert Berghoff and Uta Hagen, HB Studios, and I'm working for Bob Goddard, who's got Joshua Light Show and Pig Lights. I was the dude, and one of these guys had a gas station. His dad had a gas station on the Lower East Side on Avenue A. And by this time, Avenue A is starting to really turn into something pretty funky. And but it's still the 60s. And if you ever go see a movie across the universe, more than half of that movie takes place in the Lower East Side of the 1960s. So you get a real, and that movie caught the flavor of what that neighborhood was like. And so, and that's where the Phil Maurice was there, right? So anyway, I'm hanging out with these guys in the garage, and that was like our clubhouse. And so I was an electrician. Bobby was a mechanic who had that. His dad had that garage place, and he was a luminescent genius. He was like Tesla, but automobiles, right? And there was another guy who was really big into fluidics and everything that flows, wind, water, you name it, and anything that flows. This guy was like the magician of it. And then there was another guy, Richie. He was all about geared things, and me was the electrician. And there was another guy who was also electrician, but he was all about motors. Now, I was about motor control, motor power, motor windings, but he had the more eloquent dynamic of the mechanical, the electromechanical, and the mechanical. So we were quite an interesting little team. And there was also, I forget his name. He was more the chemist, and we had one girl, and she was, and this is 19, she was a computer girl, right? Brilliant mathematician, computers. She called herself a computer scientist. She was the first person I ever. This was in 1968. Nobody was calling themselves computer scientists, but this girl was. So we had one girl, 6 guys, and we were the team. We were 7 of us, right? We were like the Magnificent 7. So 6 guys and a girl, right? Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, so we're always in there smoking boo and fooling around doing stuff, and half of us were also artists, right? So we were doing all kind of crazy stuff, and I was the more social of the crew. So because I was connected to lots of different groups, so I was always inviting these. We would come as a crew to different parties, and we were, Alan and I always had our Friday night potluck dinner, and that was always the intelligentsia. And what was her name? My teacher, Lisette Modell Cartier-Bresson, taught photography at the New School, and those were the people who started Vogue, and so they were that fashion photo, but they were also photojournalists. Cartier-Bresson got the Nobel Prize for the photo of the guy getting shot in the Spanish Civil War. I mean, it really depicted what war was about in one photograph. And so, so I had, this really amazing intellectual life, amazing cultural life, amazing party life. It was pretty. That was the good old days. And so, and that gave me the auspices to do anything. At 16, I'm doing this kind of stuff. I never worried about anything. I never worried about my bills. I had nothing to do with my family. I mean, I'd go home Fridays. If my grandma was going to be there for the weekend, I'd go home and make eggplant parmesan with her and do my laundry. And my parents lived in such a fancy, schmancy apartment house that it was like a hotel. They had these little buttons, and the every one of those apartments had a room for the live-in maid, and that's where my grandma stayed. And my parents treated her like the live-in maid, and but she had her own house, so she didn't. That was just when she was there. But you could push this button and leave your clothes out, and there was the front door that was off the fancy hallway of the fancy elevator, and then off the kitchen there was another hallway that went to the service elevator. And so there are 2 entrances. One is the kitchen and where the servants lived, and one the front door where the rich people came in. And so the there I was, going to Cooper Union, having quite the interesting life at 16. That's when people. First, I was the kid. All the because all the people I hung, all my friends were 25 years and older. I mean, Alan was pushing 40 at that time when I knew him in the 60s or maybe late 30s. Anyway, so I was the kid, and when I started building discos and fancy nightclubs and stuff, that's when I became the dude. When I could just walk into any nightclub in New York City without having to pay. It was like straight out of Goodfellas, when the guy takes the Jewish girlfriend to that club where Tony Bennett is singing in. It's like a garage, but fancy tablecloths and fancy everything. And that was me. I'd walk in and I'd get the table up front, because I knew everybody at 16, because I fixed everyone's everything, right? Because that was what I was really good at, fixing things. And so there I am going to Cooper Union, and no test, no quiz, no textbook, no nothing. He told us stories. He was like the griot of engineering, of alternative engineering. And so our project is to figure out something that will change the world. So I have this truck, a contractor's truck, big Ford F-250, with all these boxes on it, and but it's like a coal-fired truck, man. It just had a big black cloud went out the back, and it got 3 miles to the gallon. But when gasoline only costs 16 cents a gallon, you don't worry about it. And anyway, so one day we're in the garage, and I'm having my mechanical engineer car, Tom Terrific, giving oil change and a tune-up. And he's fooling around with my car, and he, got the pipe going out the door, and he's like revving the motor and looking at it. And he's got all kind of instruments looking at all what the motor's doing. And he said, here it is Friday, and don't we have to have something that's going to save the world? And if we don't have something, that's the only grade we're going to get. And if we don't get a good grade, we could fail. And if we fail that, we'll get thrown out of school. If we get thrown out of school, we're all going to be sent to Vietnam, because all these guys weren't rich, And so, and I was just going to high school. I wasn't really worrying about Vietnam at that point, So, my friend said, Al, if we could get your car to do better mileage and not pollute like this thing is, that might save the world, right? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And so you could see the light bulb go on over his head, and he had this in the back of the lot. He had this amazing junk pile of really not junk but stuff. And he came back with another alternator and some angle iron and some pulleys and a stainless steel tank. I don't know if any of you remember when the syrup for Coca-Cola came in stainless steel tanks, and they would have hoses, and they would pump the syrup out, and it would get mixed with the seltzer water, and you'd have Coca-Cola. And so he had one of those, and it had two, snap release high pressure connections. So you take the hose off, and it turns the connection off, so that can hold the pressure inside that tank. Anyway, he drills two holes. He puts two carbon rods in there and insulates them from the tank. And he fools around, and he's welding it in there. And we're helping him a little bit, but he's doing everything. And after about 2 ounces of pot and 12 six-packs and about 36 hours, around, early Sunday morning, we were finished. And he puts water into that tank, right? Starts the engine up. And the other alternator is not charging the battery. It's taking current and putting it into the tank of water. And through electrolysis, it is turning that water into hydrogen and oxygen. And he has put the tank on an angle. And hydrogen is lighter than oxygen. And so it's up here in the tank. And there's a snap release to take the hydrogen. And he taps a thing straight into the carburetor. And he takes another hose from the level of oxygen and puts that into, so he's injecting oxygen, pure oxygen, and hydrogen into the carburetor, and it is burning the gasoline 100%. So my truck goes from, you know, a tenth of a mile by the gallon to 250 miles to the gallon of gasoline. This is in 1968. And they had just started having, in New York State, have your exhaust, see how much pollution, that had the little gizmo that you stuck in the tailpipe, and it would tell what hydrocarbons and what was coming out of the tailpipe. So that Sunday, my friend, he had a buddy who had a real fancy auto fixing shop and said, "Hey, you've just got that new machine that tells what comes out the tailpipe, don't you?" He goes, "Yep." He goes, "Can we come over there? I have a truck here that I want to see what's coming out the tailpipe." "Sure, come on over. Bring some of that boo you guys got." So we all go over there. He puts the little thing in the tailpipe, and we start the engine up, and he's running it, and he's testing it. And he goes, I can't believe this. And what's wrong? He says, "Well, I don't get any hydrocarbons or any nitrous oxide or any, all of the bad stuff. All I can see coming out of your tailpipe is a trace element of water, and a little bit of hydrogen, it's about it, nothing else, And so this thing had a printout. And so we did it 5 times and got 5 separate printouts. And so we take that with us. Monday, we go to class, and everyone has their little diorama made from ice cream pop sticks and this, that, and the other thing. And they turns to us. He goes, "Okay, you boys, what do you guys got?" And we go, "You got to come out to the parking lot." So we get out the parking lot, and we say, "Okay, we're going to take you for a ride." And he goes, "What?" He goes, "Well, it's 4:00. You don't have any more classes. We're going to take you for a ride. It's a demonstration of what we did." He goes, "You did something?" He said, "Yeah. You didn't just make a diorama. You actually did something." "Yep, we did something." So please go. You get behind the wheel. And my truck was very easy to drive. And so he gets on. He starts up the motor, and the thing is like way below empty. I mean, he's here, and this thing is down here, and it's like bending itself on that little peg, right? It wants to go even lower. That's how little gas there was. So we drove about a block and a half to where there was a gas station, and we put in 10 cents of gasoline, right? Again, 16 cents a gallon. 10 cents is like a little more than half a gallon of gasoline. So the thing just goes above. It's not even, it's like between the peg and the E. And we drive from there all the way to Frog Neck, into Connecticut, into, halfway into Connecticut towards Vermont, where along the coast there was a real nice lobster house. We have dinner and we drive back on the same 10 cents of gasoline, and the gas meter hasn't turned. And it's kind of late spring, so we get back around 7 and the sun is still up. It's still light. And so he goes, "Let's see what's under the hood." And he looks at it, and he sees another alternator, this stainless steel tank, 2 hoses going to the carburetor. We tell him what it is. We give him the printouts from the device that measure what's coming out of the thing. And he goes, "You're getting almost 200 miles to the gallon on this thing." And we go, "Yep." And he kind of smiles, and he goes, "So you guys did this last Friday, right? Ounce of pot, couple 6-packs, right? The mechanic, the smart one, he thought of this. You guys just helped, right?" And we said, He goes, so what are you going to do with it? And he goes, well, we're going to patent it and, bring it on the market. And he goes, you guys are nuts. First off, gasoline is selling at 16 cents a gallon. Maybe if you were selling at $3.20, that might be advantageous. But do you think you guys are the first morons to think of this? No. A French guy did this in the 1880s, and Rockefeller had him assassinated. The first car that was ever driven in the earth was an electric car. First car to go 60 miles an hour was an electric car. First car to go 120 miles an hour was a steam car that turned the steam into electricity. It was a hybrid, but wasn't using gasoline. It was using natural gas. Anyway, so he said, no, what you guys are going to do is take this out of the truck and destroy it and never mention it again. But you guys, not only do you get an A, you get a couple of gold stars, and I'm very proud of you. And now you are my cadre, Now we're going to do some interesting stuff. And what we did was we wrote a grant, and Cooper Union owned everything on 10th Street from the east side to the west side. And it was like a wind tunnel. And we developed these wind generators that were barrels because it was based on the Dutch. The Dutch were the first guys to use wind as power, mechanical power. People were using wind to run ships, but they were using it to, run industries, And what they realized that the pinwheel was not a good idea. So they, back in like the 16th century, developed a wind generator that was a barrel and had these fins around it. And since instead of having a thing going this way, then having to have all kinds of gears, this thing just sat right where you needed the energy, and there was one displacement of torque. And so you didn't lose any torque. And because of its design, of its stubbiness, it could generate way more torque than the sheets of the pinwheel. So we took that as our base design motif and made those, and we made them small. And all of the buildings on 10th Street were like 19th century architecture, so they all had ledges. And so we just stacked the ledges of these barrel generators on the ledges so they would catch, right where the wind was. We did a little homework and put wind things and found out where the wind was blowing the most. And we put them on the roof, and we had solar collectors for heating water and solar collect. The photovoltaics, they were there, but very expensive. And all we could do was buy broken Phillips Petroleum, I think, were one of the major. Some oil company made the photo shows that they put on satellites, but they were very expensive. And so we would buy the solar, parts that were broken. And we would, with a microscope, take them apart and solder where they were broken and kind of put them together. And so it was that wasn't very, the thing that made the most juice was our barrel generators, and collecting the heat for, from the sun, turning it into steam for heat. That was pretty efficient. And the other thing that worked really well was we had heat pumps. And we had access to, can't believe this, but in New York City, they would drill wells for lots of different reasons. And so we had a friend that had one of those drill rigs on a truck, and behind, in the little lots behind these buildings, we drilled a lot, and we're, doing heat pumps from the groundwater. And no one ever used the groundwater in New York City except for mechanical reasons and for fire reasons, to fill up standpipes. Anyway, so we did that, and we created enough energy to heat and light and like elevators and other mechanical devices, and all our stoves were electric stoves. And we also experimented with creating hydrogen instead of natural gas because it's about the same. Hydrogen is no more dangerous than natural gas. So we were creating natural gas to make hot water and to have stoves. But space heating, we were using heat pumps. So we're doing this in '68, and basically, Con Edison sued us for doing this because they said it wasn't, we were a threat to national security by, getting everyone off the grid, so Con Ed wouldn't make money. And so they sued us. But, Cooper Union had a ton of money, and they fought the federal government, the Oil Whoopiness Corporation, and the Electrical Whoopiness Corporation for 20 years until they won. And that's why today you got photo cells on your roof, and you got hybrid meters that buy and sell electricity onto the grid. We actually invented that meter, And that was the thing the utility companies were suing us about. Because there were times where the wind didn't blow and the sun wasn't sunny, and using heat pumps weren't enough. So we needed to be on the grid for those 20% of the time when you needed to get juice from the grid. But if everybody did that, man, we wouldn't have had to do what we did to the environment. So anyway, that's my little story. I don't believe a word I say, but you can go check it out. Cooper Union. Go check it out. Okay, gang. Almost 3 hour story. Ooh wee. I'm getting a little tired, so I'm gonna say goodnight. So let's read what everyone said. So JD was the most prolific. NICP, she thought that was funny. Yep. Mono, really? You in call? Yep. Mm-hmm. Went to Germany summer after the wall came down. Talk about surreal. Yeah, baby. Yep. Stifling of knowledge is harm. Yep. Whole life. I get it more than you know. Well, I'm glad you do. It's nice to have a fellow traveler. Jess. People call you Jess? Is JD good? Do you mind if I call you JD? Yeah. But basically, Tesla invented wireless transmission of electricity. I mean, transmission lines, the electricity isn't going through those wires. Those wires are waveguides. Because it's alternating current, polyphase alternating current, it is going through the ether. So the transmissions, they call them transmissions lines because they're transmitting the current. It's not, you know, um, what DC does. It's not being, what's the term that it is? It's not induction. It's not transmission. It's escaping my mind what it's called. But anyway, yes. And we live on a planet of abundance. You know what Mr. Star Trek with the replicator and all of that. I mean, that is reality. The all of that stuff. Um, that what's his name? What was his name? Who did Star Trek? And he came from JPL. He was one of those boys. So he was just trying, and the flip phone, it was the communicator. That's a flip phone. Yeah, that's how I curse too, JD. Uh, and so JD, what I just told you about. I mean, it was really simple. I mean, we did that You have a good junkyard nearby. I bet you could find everything you would need if you know how to weld and work on, engines. But they turned. I used to be able. When back in the day, my friend who was a really good mechanic, he would have me work on things because I'm mechanically inclined. But today, I can't work on a car. Computers and all. I mean, even the auto mechanics can't even work on freaking cars. They can't even figure. I had a problem electrically, and it took. They changed the battery, changed the alternate. No, the freaking ground wasn't right. Now I'm not a car mechanic, but I said it's an electrical problem with the ground, and that cars blow my mind because me as an electrician, you have a black wire and a white wire. The neutral and the hot lead, right? Well, cars they have no neutral. The ground is it. Period. You know. So, yep. Jess says, "Oh my God, scientists tried say they found something new just to find out Tesla was working on it. Um, tech, how many years ago? Like 120 years ago, 1890s. Gene Roddenberry. Yep, that's the boy. He was part. He was part of that cabal. Of the guy who was part of Scientology, and the other guy who is like, devil worshipping guy in America. So above, so below. So my story, ear hair, just so it's a little spoiler, once it gets published. So I have four. It's a 4-book series, and I'm doing a George Lucas, and that the first book is book number 2, right? And it's called Ear Hair. Second book is called Legacy, and it's book number 3. The third book is the 4th book, and that's Legend. And the 4th book is going to be um, the beginning of the story, but it'll be the 4th book, meaning it'll be the beginning of the story, but it's going to come at the end. So and everybody, there's a ton of things going on. It's like David Copperfield, a zillion different characters, and they're all interconnected, and a lot of them are the same person, just living in different lifetimes, different time zones, different everything. And so in Ear Hair, there is the 2 major characters, not the protagonist, the hero, or the ingenue, but main side characters is the devil and Jesus, and they're twins, right? And the devil was born 16 billion years before Jesus, but they're twins because twins. One comes out first, and the other one comes second, and with those guys, there was a lot of mud puppet time between them. And Jesus is black as Ace of Spades with really curly hair because, Jesus was born in freaking Africa. He wasn't white with blue eyes and brown long hair. No, sorry. So, Gene Roddenberry, yes. I have a welder and electrical on hand. Okay, there you go. My truck has no computer. There you go. Parts for a reason. There you go. You can do this. That's your. So, Jess, do me a big favor. Email me because I have, after 12 years of using email, I still have not been able to ever start an email stream. Meaning, someone sends me email, I can reply, hit the button, type something out and hit reply. But to send it to you using your address, thank you for it, but I can't do it. So, yeah, 16 billion years later. Yep. And so if you could just please just send me, hey, this is me, JD, Jessica. D. Davenport. I love that name, Jessica Davenport. That sounds like a ingenue in a 1950s mystery. What are they? What are those black and white movies called? You know, oh, I forgot what they called them. Anyway, you sound like a character in that. So anyway, I'm getting tired, and it's been 3 hours now. If I keep talking, it'll be sunrise. Anyway, I'm gonna do another one tomorrow. So all you guys are invited. Love to see you, Jess. Um, I know you've been watching this for a while, but I'm glad you come on tonight. So, like I said, send me a little, hey, this is me, and then I'll get back to you. Yeah, it wasn't a white guy. And you know, gang, I am an African American that's melanin challenged. I love you. Remember that prayer. Bless me, Father Sky, Mother Earth, Holy Spirit. Bless me indeed, enlarge my territory, put your hands upon my shoulders, and keep me from evil, so I will do no harm. I hope. I love you guys. Till tomorrow.